On a cloudy day, two individuals are eating chicken drumsticks in a restaurant. Hugo, a Sagittarius saint, is one of them, and he informs the other that he is going to die the next day. The second person, a 13th awakened called Jian, responds by not taking it seriously and addressing Hugo as Otiksu, asking why Hugo wants him to die so badly. Jian laughs in response as Hugo clarifies that his name is Hugo and not Otiksu. Jian reassures Hugo that he won't pass away so quickly and encourages him not to worry too much. Jian boasts of his prowess, saying that he has defeated more calamities on his own than all 12 of the saints put together. Hugo doesn't say anything in return, but a worried look persists on his face. The Demon Tower is then described to us. This evil location is notorious for being the location where the biggest disaster completely wiped away the lives of humans. It all began on the final day of the 20th century, when catastrophes arose out of nowhere and pushed people into an impossible situation. The 12 heavenly beings showed up when mankind was about to collapse and pledged to help people to overcome the disasters. They chose 12 awakened people for this purpose. Unexpectedly, the 13th awoke, who had not been blessed by any of the celestial beings, manifested. Surprisingly, compared to the other 12 people, sometimes known as the 12 saints, this awakened person was incredibly powerful and magnificent. The protagonist of the narrative and the one who gave the 12 saints the opportunity to take down the Demon Tower, Jian, is this awakened individual. Hugo, a saint of the sign of Sagittarius, meets Jian while they are on their mission in the Demon Tower and thanks him for his contribution to the victory. Jian responds by addressing Hugo as Otiksu and says that for the next 5 years, all he needs is fried chicken, not lip worship. As Hugo asks him that will he ever get sick of eating the fried chicken, the other saints converse about how defeating Crimson Eye will bring them amazing riches. They anticipate at least 100 billion won, given the severity of the catastrophe. Jian interrupts them while they are discussing it and advises them to at least accept being able to stay at a 7-star hotel for the ensuing 10 years. He dons his face mask and declares that the Crimson Eye has brought numerous nations to the brink of bankruptcy. One of the saints replies that Jian needs a lot of cash to negotiate with them since he needs to mend his broken face and hurt body. Jian stands by as the saints leave the talk, believing that despite their claim to be saints, they are really just goons who only worry about themselves. As he muses about this, they turn back once again and restrict him from going to any ruined sites right away, explaining that they must produce more victims in order to receive a higher prize. After they beat the Crimson Eye, Jian, disgusted by their brutality, chooses to cut off all ties with them. The other saints follow him, and when they get to a spot in the tower, they stare forward in amazement. The Crimson Eye, the powerful boss of the Demon Tower, is seated in front of them and displays a ferocious expression. They are all put under strain by the monster's solitary glare, which even surprises Jian because it is so threatening. They are pondering how to fight the monster when it lets out a tremendous roar that causes the entire tower to severely shake, shocking them. Suddenly, the tower's walls and the earth beneath their feet both started to tremble, and there was a blast that wreaked destruction. The floor in the center of the tower collapses as it continues to roar, releasing a tremendous burst of light that causes all the saints to soar up with it. The beam of light is so strong that it even pierces the tower's roof and reaches the sky. The saints eventually shiver in horror as they look in front of them, and the light eventually goes out. Before their eyes, the tower's floor changes into a large lava pit. The powerful Crimson Eye, who is seated on a throne on the opposite side of the pit, wears a sadistic expression. They stand up to flee, quaking with terror and awe, as they realize they can't battle such a strong creature and should put their own lives in danger. Jian wonders how such cowardly individuals can be considered saints as he stands in his position and turns to face them as they flee. He tightly holds his blade and makes the decision to disregard them, believing that he would be the one to eliminate the Crimson Eye. Consequently, he laughs and moves away from his position, leaping into the air to attack the creature, while maintaining a look of ferocious purpose. But just as he begins to attack, he himself is stabbed in the back and stumbles into an ambush, where he stays for a while, losing all sense of time and reality. He continues to defeat powerful creatures without stopping, since he lacks the time to consider the world outside the tower. However, the onslaught of creatures never abates, since the enticement he has stepped into continues to call forth endless catastrophes. He even loses an arm in this never-ending conflict, Yet he still stands tall in front of the demons with a sword in one hand and a blade in the other. He still has enough faith in himself to know that he will withstand the monster's attacks and not perish. He continued to battle them in this manner for 20 years. He finally encounters the creature's administrator after 20 years, who is surprised to see him there and wonders how he succeeded to get there. It is terrified as Jian, who is now more older and stronger, stands in front of it. So it calls for help from other monsters for assistance. Jian smashes his foot to crush the creature, killing it instantaneously, declaring that no matter how loud it screams, no one is left to save it. Jian stands in front of the monster after killing it, wondering if the protracted conflict is truly over and if he may now leave the tower. But as he begins to move away, he collapses on the ground after running out of energy and is immersed in an darkness. Two youngsters rush for their life outside the tower in the city that resembles more of a demolished arena. While fleeing, one of them claims that he warned the other not to go there, to which the other responds that the day was supposed to be safe. They are pursued as they flee by powerful catastrophes that appear to have materialized out of nowhere. The disasters eventually catch up with them, giving them the impression that their demise is imminent. Suddenly, one of the creatures lunges up and slams into one of the kids, sending him tumbling to the ground. More and more creatures begin to surround them as they are both helplessly sitting on the ground. One of them, feeling helpless, says that if Jian had been in the demon tower, none of these tragedies would have happened. They were startled when, at that very moment, the demon tower's doors started to gently open. They are startled as an earth-shattering boom is immediately followed by a dazzling light shining from the tower. A sizable hole of lava erupts from the explosion's debris once it is settled. The kids wonder what it may be as they are trapped beneath the debris. One of them, startled, looks up and motions for the other to do the same. A human being is standing ahead of them after emerging from the fallen demon tower. This individual, who reveals himself to be Jian, tightens his fists in retaliation for those who deceived him and tricked him. He vows that all those who tricked him would perish at his hands, his eyes burning with a ferocious resolve. The kids sit in astonishment as they watch the astonishing scenario play out in front of them from their hiding place among the wreckage of the monster tower that has fallen. While they watch, Jian stands before them, destroying formidable foes like bugs with his bare hands. The kids are amazed as they watch him and comment that they are orange-class disasters that even highly ranking awakened people find difficult to overcome. But it is beyond their comprehension to see how Jian treats them like insects. Jian notices them as they talk amongst themselves and turns to face them, because he thinks they could be creatures hidden amid the debris. He suddenly leaps into the air, startling the kids, and descends in front of them, clearing the debris and showing them to them, shocking them. Jian recognizes that the kids are humans as they begin to flee in terror, quaking and questioning why he would harm them. He concludes that it all has been cleaned up in light of that, which causes the kids to exhale in relief. The youngsters express their surprise at the appearance of a person from the tower as he looks about. One of them, though, thinks it's impossible since he thinks he just so happened to be present as the tower was coming down. Behind them, a massive shadow appears out of nowhere. Then a massive boss monster appears. When the kids see this, they are in a state of deep disbelief and decide to leave right away. But Jian stays still and smiles. The creature opens its lips and shoots forth a strong beam with a ferocious murderous intent in its eyes, making the kids cover their eyes in terror. The monster focuses its destructive energy wave at Jian and the kids, destroying everything in its path, including the buildings, and wreaking havoc on the city. The kids are shocked to have survived and stare forward in disbelief as they emerges from the wreckage they were hiding under. When the wave stops, Jian is standing in front of them, entirely unaffected by the force of the wave, which baffles them. They watch as Jian flies through the air toward the big boss monster and quickly falls upon it, wondering whether he rescued them. The youngsters watch in astonishment as Jian unleashes a strong surge of energy from his fist and redirects it to the monster, sending it tumbling to the ground. Finally, the boss beast is already dead when he hits the ground, and the two youngsters stand still in astonishment. Jian glances at the two kids behind him and shouts out to them, thinking that everything is really over this time. As he turns to face them, he gives them directions on where to go. They're puzzled when Jian orders them to go purchase him some food, after abruptly switching to a happy face. He continues by saying that they ought to also get him some clothing. Later, the lads seated in front of Jian are shocked by the cost, as he places a depleted bowl of noodle on a table in a fast food restaurant. Jian responds that he held back a bit, since he doesn't have enough money, as they exclaim their disbelief at how much he ate, leaving them angry. He comes to the waiter again and asks for a second serving of soup, saying that they pledged to buy him anything he requested as a sign of appreciation, which enrages the youngster. One of them suddenly inquires about his identity and his activities near the tower. They are surprised when Jian responds while he is busy brushing his teeth and says that he got out of the tower. Changing the subject, he goes to the youngster and asks, "Who are you?" adding that, because he can detect magic in him, the boy doesn't appear like a typical human. In answer, the other person says that Jimin is a follower and asks if Jian is also a follower who was blessed by the divine entity to awaken. Jian disagrees, claiming that he is not required to serve them. He then observes his own image in the spoons and is startled to realize that his face isn't as harmed as it once was. He is so shocked that he asks if there is a mirror anywhere, and the waiter leads him there. When he gets to the mirror, he takes off his shirt and looks at his body, feeling amazed to see that his entire body has healed. Examining each one, he thinks about how seriously damaged his skin, hair, and even teeth once were, and how impossible it would be to restore them without endangering his strength. He is also taken aback to see that his left arm, which had been amputated during the fight with the monsters, is returned. He is looking at his left arm when, all of a sudden, he sees a snake mark on his hand and wonders what it is. That mark changes into a genuine snake out of nowhere, shocking him and inflicting severe pain throughout his body. Just then, he learns that because he had died, all of his accomplishments would be transferred to a fresh form, and his zodiac abilities would allow him to harness the might of Ophiuchus. He suddenly gently opens his eyes, closes them again, and is suddenly transported into a wide open area. He finds himself drifting in space in the midst of a huge serpent. As he opens his eyes once more, he reaches out to grasp the snake, feeling astonished and perplexed. And right away as his hand touches the snake's body starts to emit a brilliant light. He sees himself back inside of the mirror, seated on the floor and perspiring, while the glow becomes stronger. When the lads who are in front of him inquire whether he is okay, he looks confusedly in the mirror. He turns to them and inquires as to whether they noticed the enormous snake. Jimin responds that he didn't, and Jian simply ripped off his shirt, hurried to the mirror, and then shouted while grabbing his wrist. Jian considers whether others could not see the snake's mark on his hand, while the lads watch him in silence and consider him odd. He is then informed that he is now in control of Ophiuchus by the dazzling light reappearing in front of him once more. Numerous alerts start to flood in as he remains motionless above the brilliant light, notifying him that he has obtained a super regenerative talent and suffered a 50% reduction in his physical ability. The fact that the saints never informed him that they could see such windows leads him to conclude that his bodily transformation was the product of the super regenerative skill. Additionally, he is unable to detect any divine entities, but given that his body recuperated, he does not view this as a negative. He, therefore, makes the decision to avenge the one who struck him in the back by killing all the saints who fled the tower. As a result, he grows enthusiastic about the adventure, making the lads quake in terror at his unusual demeanor. While everything is going on, several agencies and broadcasters are drawn to the city as word of the Devil Tower crumbling spreads. They have gathered around the demolished building's debris because they view it as a major international event. People looking at the debris assume that the destroyed tower was a prominent landmark in the area and wonder if Li Jian's disciples, who despise him, are to blame. They wonder who killed them and demolished the demon tower as they examine the dead creatures. Yet they don't believe that even the more senior followers could have accomplished such a feat. They consider this and wonder if Jian indeed survived in the tower and came back, resolving to wait and see to find out. A ceremony is taking place in the background as several cameras are set up on Yang Wei inside a huge structure. Reporters approach him and begin asking him about his opinions on the fall of the skyscraper and the possibility that Li Jian is still alive. The era Saint Yang Wei replies, "I won't answer that," and turns to go. He expresses his annoyance at often hearing Li Jian's name referenced that day. As he waits in the car to leave, he views Jian's existence and his 20-year sojourn in the tower as impossibilities, considering it impossible to have defeated so many black-ranked demonic animals. He puffs on his cigar and thinks that nobody could never escape from such place without a miracle. He comforts himself that Jian's physique has already been destroyed by the power's recoil, and that he hasn't been blessed by supernatural creatures like the saints. He still worries, though, that if Jian has actually survived, it would be devastating for them and mean the end of everything. Jian chooses to start by getting rid of one specific individual while he is on the phone and watching something else. An airplane lands at an airport in the United Kingdom, and as a passenger steps out of it, he or she is greeted with open arms by those who think it is an honor to meet him. Hugo Otters, the Sagittarius saint and Jian's closest companion, turns out to be the individual. Hugo asks the Prime Minister where he is when he gets off the plane, and he replies that he is waiting at home with a car ready to drive him there. Hugo, who is quite respectable in the eyes of the people gathered there, tells them to go straight there. After hearing this, they consider him to be a truly chosen one because of his modest demeanor. Hugo is silently driving toward the Prime Minister's house in the automobile, staring out the window, when unexpectedly his phone starts to ring. Hugo is irritated when he assumes the contact is from reporters, because he believes they are still involved in the enigma regarding Jian's survival. He flicks his phone and remarks that it has been around for 20 years, due to the annoying persistent buzzing from an unknown caller. He then starts gazing outdoors, while remembering the time he predicted his death for the following day, but Jian dismissed it as a prank that would never materialize. He recalls that at Jian's request, he took care of the creatures outside the demonic tower during the attack. He prayed fervently for Jian to survive and for his prediction to be proven false, but after leaving him inside, the other saints abandoned him and came back with the Crimson Eye's head. Due to the widespread recognition of their accomplishments, they were hailed as heroes who attain great power and status. Hugo repeatedly asked for the discovery of the tower because he was never prepared to accept that Jian had passed away. The other saints, on the other hand, declined to do that, saying that he ought to be aware of the threat posed by rising monsters and that it was absurd that Jian was still alive. They informed him that although he might enter the building alone and search furiously for him, doing so would only result in his death and reduce the total number of saints to 11 instead. He wanted to go back inside the tower, but this both infuriated him and dissuaded him from doing so. Hugo regrets the incident and keeps staring out the window, believing that no matter how powerful Jian is, it will be impossible for him to survive, and that it has been too late. He takes up the phone from the Prime Minister and inquires as to what is going on while he is doing that. The Prime Minister responds by talking about the similar instance of the Devil Tower collapsing. Hugo shakes his head in disappointment as he understands that the Prime Minister also plans to talk about the same. He apologizes to the Prime Minister in advance and informs him that he is declining to look for Jian if they want it. He expresses his conviction that Jian perished in the demonic tower and speculates that his adherents may be those responsible for this catastrophe. The Prime Minister rejects, stating that this isn't the case, and he believes that he is attempting to utilize that problem to get support for his candidacy. He adds that, in accordance with information he recently received through the Korean government, Hugo's phone call from a few moments earlier was actually from Jian, which leaves Hugo bewildered. Hugo shouts and orders the driver to stop the car right away, which the driver complies with as he is overcome with great shock. He examines his phone as he is seated in the car, finding it unbelievable and doubting that Jian was the source of the calls. His disbelief grows when he takes up the phone and examines the screen, which shows 30 calls that went unanswered and a message. He eventually brings the phone to his ear and selects the voicemail. An instantly recognizable voice addresses him as Oh Taek-soo, promising to hunt him and murder him, while wishing him luck. Hugo is in a state of utter shock and questions whether Jian is actually there. Then, disregarding his business in England, he orders the driver to instantly turn around the car and return to the airport. While all is going on, Jian is sitting in the fast food restaurant holding his phone, believing that Hugo has actually matured and learned how to reject his calls. The lads keep staring at him and asking him who he was phoning, to which he replies that they would find out shortly. He notices the phone, something he had never heard of before, and thinks it's a cool device. He claims that the year was 2005 when he first entered the tower, but as the lads tell him that he is able to access the internet and view news, he realizes that it is now 2025 and the world has improved. When Jian expresses interest in reading the articles regarding Lee Jian, they allow it since they claim that they are now popular. After saying so, Jimin stands up and opens a number of articles on Jian on his phone, surprising himself. However, after reading the comments left about him, he discovers that people don't value him and believe that Crimson Eye was vanquished by the 12 Saints, which infuriates him. He says, clenching the phone firmly, the 12 Saints were the ones who became frightened and fled, feeling furious as Jimin begins to worry about his phone. However, Jian makes the decision to keep his cool, regaining his composure and carrying on with his browsing. He worries if Lee Jian's choice to donate all of his possessions to charity was properly maintained when, all of a sudden, he finds an article describing that decision. However, as he clicks on the story, he discovers that the 12 saints said he left all of his possessions to them in order to rescue mankind and declared his death after departing the tower. Because of this, all of them aside from Sagittarius got a piece of his fortune. Jian ultimately smashes the phone with his hand after learning this information and vows to murder everyone and rip them to pieces. Jimin breaks down in tears as she witnesses the phone being destroyed. Jian is currently unsure of what to do since, while wanting to proclaim his return, he feels that no matter what he tells people, they won't believe him because of how drastically his look has altered. He so chooses to maintain his silence and handle with all the saints one at a time. All the while Jimin continues to sob and clutch his shattered phone. Jian sits calmly as the other boy soothes him, a weird energy slowly encircling him without his being aware of it. The moment he realizes who is observing him, he receives an alert that someone is doing so. As a result, he stands up and begins to leave, prompting the kids to inquire as to his whereabouts. He responds by saying he's just heading outside for some fresh air. He exits the building and wonders if Ares' minions are the many creatures that resemble demons that surround the eatery. He gets an alert that these beings are erecting a barrier and lessening the power of other zodiac signs at precisely that moment, along with a demand for a tribute. He is outraged by this and decides to discipline them. He turns round to see two individuals approaching when he hears someone yell his name and express their irritation at hearing it everywhere. One of them says that he has received all the attention in the press and questions what it is taking place, while him becoming a lost case, as he observes them with uncertainty. Jimin recognizes them as members of the Gemini divine cadre. Upon looking at their badges, which have the sign of the Gemini zodiac, he then begins to feel uneasy. The moment the individuals notice Jian, they halt abruptly, and Jimin instructs Jian to go back inside, so they won't get into a fight. Jimin suddenly understands that they are unable to prevent what is going to happen when one of the two asks him why he is obstructing their path and orders him to move on. Just then, the cigarette smoker inhales the vapor and exhales it across Jian's face. He responds by remaining motionless, and when the guy approaches, he asks if he is furious, encouraging him to try hitting him if he is. The female advises the individual to leave him, claiming that he could be terrified. When he continues to stand calmly in response, they start to leave after saying that those who are losers like him admire Li Jian. They keep remarking that Jian is the least powerful of the 12 saints while he stands there, doing his best to contain his rage. Jimin and his pal had come over at that very moment, complimenting him on his attempts to maintain his composure. The very next second, though, Jian explodes with rage and turns to the Gemini disciples, calling them roaches. They turn around, shocked and furious, questioning whether he actually called them roaches. He loudly agrees and refers to them as a pair of cockroaches once again. The guy approaches him again and asks him to repeat what he said, describing him as an average person from whom he is unable to detect any mana. Jian raises his finger towards the individual's forehead as he speaks, flicking it softly, sending the individual tumbling back to the ground. The person's partner, the lads, and Jian are all in great astonishment as they observe this. But Jian stands tall and is grinning. The girl, who had been in a state of disbelief, starts to strike back at that point. Jian responds with a smile, saying she was wrong to assume he wouldn't see her activities from behind. He flicks her with his middle finger as well, turning around quickly and forcing her to fall to the ground with her companion. He boldly asserts that they didn't even measure to that much after accomplishing that. The lads worrifully inquire of him, how can he use his abilities in the center of the street? He turns over and replies that if he had used his actual skills, they would have perished. The kids are in utter disbelief as they realize he vanquished the A-rank followers with just a flick of his finger. Jian walks up to the Gemini disciple, sits down next to him, and looks at the necklace he is sporting. Jian explains that he got a strange sensation when striking the individual, which he relates to the necklace, and takes the necklace off his neck while holding it in his palm. He then looks to the kids and asks whether it's a heavenly artifact, questioning why people like them would have something that saints usually only have. Surprisingly, the kids inquire as to whether he is actually ignorant, admitting that a few decades ago, tragedies had almost wiped off humanity. As a result, the saints developed heavenly cadres, since it would be difficult to rely just on 12 people to preserve mankind. They clarified that individuals who have been made powerful by the saints and given awakening are known as disciples, who are all ranked according to their faith and strength, and are all under the direction of the saints. They also reveal that certain followers are given gifts by supernatural creatures in exchange for their dedication. Jian becomes aware of the vast changes that have taken place in the world, while his 20-year exile as a result of this epiphany. He glances to see the same celestial beings hovering about them as Jimin screams out to him, pleading with him to look away. He learns simultaneously that these animals are taking pleasure in the scenario and urges him to get rid of the two people, while offering a beneficial reward in exchange. The moment Jimin notices this, he is astounded to realize that he has the attention of the houses of the divine beings, which act as their shadows, and against whom is to oppose the heavenly beings. In light of this, Jimin begs Jian to abide by their requests and follow their instructions. Jian recognizes in reaction that Yang Wei himself, as well as the servants of Ares, are in a similar situation, seeking to sate their thirst. Because of this, he lifts one foot and stomps it down with vigor. This produces a strong wave that scatters the divine beings as they are trapped in a storm. Jian stays firm and wonders how the holy beings dared to challenge him, as the effect of this wave approaches the sky, driving the creatures to escape. Jimin understands that Jian isn't an ordinary guy, because such powerful demonic beings have withdrew, and the walls have disappeared. Jian turns to Jimin and reiterates their assertion that the individual who he recently knocked out is Gemini's student. In answer, Jimin nods in agreement and discloses that they are members of the heavenly Cadre, the most powerful force in the nation, and an elite group made up of a number of powerful individuals. Jian concludes that, in light of this, these individuals must be quite wealthy, as seen by the person's branded clothing and possessions. The guys are startled when he reaches out to that individual once more and begins taking away all of his possessions.